A lot of people have been affected by COVID-19 in many ways. The people hit hardest are those who share or work with large groups of people. I know so many musicians, speakers, actors, and entertainers whose livelihood vanished virtually overnight. And despite the ease of restrictions on gatherings now, and the actual virus turning out to be less deadly than we thought, many of their bookings appear to be gone for good. This is where Dr. Jo Lichten found herself as well. A world-renowned speaker and business consultant, I met Dr. Jo through her work at Johnson & Johnson's Human Performance Institute. With no speaking or in-person training engagements in her future, Dr. Jo found this to be quite a challenge. But with every new challenge comes a new opportunity. And Dr. Jo's Health and Sanity Call was soon born. This new podcast is a voice of reason, blending science with a healthy dose of reality. Dr. Jo interviews the top minds in stress management, nutrition, movement, mental health, and more. And her new virtual training program, the Reboot Quiz Show, creates an interactive and fun learning environment through a remote broadcast. Anything but your average webinar, her interactive training feels more like a game show, with prizes included. The high energy she brings to the stage, Dr. Jo now brings that same intensity to the podcasting and virtual training space. Hear all about her post-COVID-19 transformation and how she is rebooting energy in the workplace in my most recent conversation with Dr. Jo Lichten. So let me ask you this. When I did yoga on the beach, I really preferred that compact sand. Like, I did not like the soft sandy spots. Do you do it in the really soft sand or you do it in the more compact?
Yes and yes. I mean, it's kind of like wherever she sets it up, depending on if it's low tide or high tide. So if it's low tide, we have more compact sand to deal with. But sometimes it's high and all we've got is the really dry sand. And I mean, there are times where I reach over and I'm pounding the sand because the way it's shifted, I feel bad on my back or, whatever.
Trying to pound you at a flat spot.
Yeah, so it's not like on my back. But all of it's fun.
Well, hey, we'll go ahead and jump right into this. This is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Dr. Jo.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really excited for this high energy conversation that we're about to have.
Well, me too.
You're my second guest from the Orlando area that has been one of these super high energy guests. And
Let me guess, was the first one your dad?
No, actually, my dad's
3.
getting old. He doesn't have nearly the high energy that you guys have. No, it was Cynthia Blackwell. I had her on a few weeks ago. She's an amazing lady, and she's in the personal development realm as well. She does some consulting, and she actually reminds me a ton of you. But thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you guys are super busy, and I guess we should start off by talking about how our paths kind of crossed. With Johnson & Johnson, my dad was one of the speakers over there, and you were one of the main speakers over there, getting everybody recharged and energized. And I guess that'd be a good way to start. Tell us about how you got involved with them.
Well, so actually, I lived up in Atlanta at the time. So I lived up in Marietta, not too far from you. Yeah. And I heard about Johnson & Johnson's Human Performance Institute. And I just thought, gosh, I'm speaking about energy. They're doing energy. We need to work together. And so they actually invited me down to attend a program just free to find out what's going on. They weren't looking for a coach outside of Orlando at that point. But they just said, come on down, check it out. Let's, see how we can possibly work together. And then as it turned out, I ended up moving to Orlando. It had nothing to do with HPI. In fact, it wasn't until probably a year later, I thought, oh, wait a minute, I need to look them up again. And so I became one of the performance coaches at J&J HPI. Your dad, Richard Garrison, was also one of the performance coaches, so I got to know him. He moved into our neighborhood, so I knew he and his wife, mom Donna, very well. And so I loved their organization because it was, like I said, what I had been talking about, but it was a bigger platform. I loved the fact that I could reach out to C-suite executives.
Yeah, to have a corporate sponsorship level package is very exciting.
Yes. And the best part I think about that was that I got to speak about what I loved to talk about, and there was no marketing involved. So like, for example, in my business and your business, as you know, you have to market, you have to put up the website, do social media. And I thought that was a great opportunity because I got to do the part that I love and I didn't have to do the other part.
And so let's talk about that part that you love, because that part is really kind of the meat and potatoes of it all. Share about this. Well, maybe we can start with the book if you want to talk with Reboot, or if you want to just talk about the whole high energy level package that you have.
Yeah, I mean, the book Reboot came out only half a dozen years ago, but I had been speaking about energy for forever, I think. It was even when I was doing other things. So it goes back to when I was 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, I weighed what I do right now, which is not overweight, but for some reason I got in my brain that I became anorexic, dropped 40 pounds in a matter of 2 months, and then kept up all those eating disorders, bulimia, binge eating, and so forth, all through college while I was training to become a registered dietitian. So in other words, here I was training to help other people when I couldn't even help myself. But even when I recovered from the eating disorder, which is a long process, I found that a lot of things came back, but one of the things that never came back was my energy. So, you remember when you were a little kid, what kid doesn't come out of the womb with like tons of energy? And at some point, that energy wanes. Research suggests it's somewhere in people's 40s, perhaps. Sometimes it's in their 30s. But let's face it, most kids in their teens and their 20s, they can do anything. They can treat their body no matter what. They can stay up however late they want. And
eat whatever they want.
Right, they can. But at some point, it kind of catches up and you can no longer sustain that lifestyle and have the energy that you once had. But for me, it disappeared long before then. And so I was always on the search for how can I get my energy back? And then in my practice, I was always meeting people with the same troubles, like, oh my gosh. And they'd even say, I love your energy. Are you just naturally energetic? And I'm like, hardly, and this is what I did. And so people started getting attracted to that message. And so as I started speaking, and I should say I was a clinical dietitian for a number of years. I taught at a university. It was actually University of Texas, right there on the border of Texas and Mexico, where I developed a dietetics program. I, worked in industries as well. But when I finally started my own practice more than 20 years ago, I found that the energy message is what most people wanted to hear about. They were kind of envious that I had this energy, and what I thought at that point, it kind of came natural. I realized that other people were struggling with.
So how did you begin to get that energy level back for you personally? Because you said like once you had recovered from some of the disorder, that was all dealt with, but the energy was slow to come back. So what was your process to get it back for you?
I'd have to say that the first part was when I met with a dietitian when I was a dietitian. So in other words, and it wasn't like an appointment per se. I was actually working with her on a research study, and she started talking to me about how food is fuel. And it's weird because I'm in the business. I know what food does, but for some reason I never thought about it as fuel. And then I started looking into how the body, like for example, most people don't realize, because I hear this all the time, they'll say, oh, I didn't eat much during the day because I'm just sitting at my desk. And they're like, and that just blows me away because I'm like, well, you know what? You could be just sitting at your desk. You could be just sleeping, 16 hours of your day, I'm sure, sleeping and sitting at your desk. But you know what? 2/3 of all the calories you burn in a given day are just to keep you alive, for your heart to beat, for your lungs to breathe, for your brain to process it all. And so you need calories throughout the whole day. So it's kind of like being in your car. I don't know, you're probably too young, but I remember, I have 8 brothers and sisters, so we had a lot of junker cars that you always had to tweak and so forth, and I even got into that. And sometimes the car didn't start. You had to put a little gas in the carburetor to kind of jump it, and there were times where we had a car that we had to push it downhill to jump it.
Pop the clutch.
Yeah, I mean, we need fuel to start those engines. We need fuels for our phones, for our computers. And people don't even think about what fuels the human body. So for me, the first step was, oh my gosh, understanding that I need food to fuel my body just to stay alive. And I needed to stop ignoring, so many of these diets teach you, oh, just ride out your hunger, burn some body fat. And I'm like, yeah, as if it worked that way, we'd all be thin, right?
Right.
And even this whole thing with intermittent fasting, people get into this. Wow, I just eat within an 8-hour period of time. And I'm like, you know what? That diet has been around forever. It's called skipping breakfast.
Right.
And that didn't work. So what makes you think this is going to work now by giving it a fancy name?
Oh, no. That's so true.
So, that was the first part is just fueling your body when it needed. Probably the second thing was stop ignoring your hunger. It's like saying, I got to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to ignore it, make sure it goes away. I mean, we don't ignore the urge to sneeze or to use the bathroom. So don't ignore the urge to eat. It's telling your body you need fuel at that moment.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, because for me, it took getting into doing triathlons and getting into an exercise mode where that was what it took for me to begin to think of food as fuel. But I love that shift in mindset. I think that shift in mindset is necessary to then begin to treat your body the way that it needs to be treated. Treat it just like you would like you said, with your car or anything else. You have to continue to put that gas in the tank.
And I think athletes have a better understanding of this concept. They really do. They know that if they don't fuel their body in a marathon in a certain way, whatever it is with the drinks or the goo or gummy bears, but they're going to bonk out. So they know that those concepts, and we just need to teach people to respect their body. I think that's a good word, respect.
Yeah, you get to see the results. The athletes, when they're doing a sport like triathlon or running a marathon, when you don't fuel it right, you get to see the crash. You get to see the burnout. You can immediately begin to tell. Unfortunately, for most of us in our day-to-day lives, when we're skipping breakfast, when we're going through, because I see it happen with my wife quite a bit, she gets so focused in on work. And again, she's sitting at a desk and taking calls and all the minutia that goes on through the day. A lot of times she'll just forget to eat or just not make time for that. And then you see the blood sugar dip, you see the spike in cortisol, and you see the attitude shift, and the mood and the mindset begin to change. And so, like, if I know she hasn't eaten, I know to steer clear, or either that or bring her some food one way or the other.
My husband's that way too. If I kind of start an argument, he'll say, Joanne, get something to eat. I mean, he just knows better.
It's like that classic Snickers bar commercial, right?
Yes. I don't know who I change into, but I definitely do change. Yeah. But it's just being observant of all of that. And you're absolutely right that athletes recognize the decrease in the performance, but we normal people, corporate athletes, as J&J calls it, need to understand that it too is affecting our performance, our decisions that we make, the ability to brainstorm and problem solve. We just don't relate it, and perhaps because we feel kind of bad all day long. So we don't notice the good moments and the bad moments. And that's what happens with decades of not treating your body well.
Was there anyone in the early days, as you began to develop your process of having a higher energy level, was there anybody in your life that was kind of like an example of like, okay, there's somebody who has it figured out, and that's who I kind of want to aspire to be?
Well, I mean, Margaret Konis was that dietitian that helped me to understand the concept, a woman I greatly admired. But I would just say that I had a lot of respect for those individuals who didn't get caught up in the latest fads. You know what I mean? The people who just A lot of this, as I talk about it, oftentimes people will say, oh, that's just common sense. And I'm like, yeah, common sense isn't always common practice though. So, how can we get people back to that common sense of fueling our body, getting enough sleep, getting in movement throughout the day? And so I look at those people who are just not getting caught up in all these crazy ideas about diet and exercise and sleep, and just kind of going back to the old ways of how we used to look at our body and how we used to treat it.
So let's talk about those. What are the basics for folks that are trying to develop and maintain a higher energy or even just a healthier lifestyle? We could go into a ton of nitty gritty, but what are some of those basic first steps, other than obviously we talked about consistent eating as being kind of the first one? What are some of the others?
And as a matter of fact, even though I'm a PhD nutritionist, so my background is in nutrition, my whole career has built upon more of the wellness arena. So, and in fact, I love I took a neurophysiology course at Vassar College as part of my master's was not at Vassar, but I needed one extra credit and I took a class there. My master's was actually at Virginia Tech. And it was that neurophysiology class where we did a deep dive into the whole science of sleep. That was so fascinating. Now, keep in mind, this is in the 70s. And so we didn't really understand about REM sleep until back then, right? It was starting in the 50s and 60s and 70s. REM sleep meaning like when we dream and the whole stages of sleep. And so all of this was like eye-opening for me to understand how this works. And I think for many people, more important than the way we fuel our body is the sleep. For example, I had this one guy who came to see me a number of years back, and he really wanted some diet help, right? He had gained about 50 pounds. He was 50 years old, but he had gained about 50 pounds since his college years. His cholesterol was up, his blood sugar was up, his blood pressure was up. Like everything was exploding all at one time. And what prompted this is because someone said something about, oh, I hear your 50th birthday is coming up. And he was like, oh my gosh, that's when my dad died of a heart attack. And so then he went to see his doctor. He saw these numbers. He was just freaking out. He came to see me and he said, I need some diet help. And surely he had some problems with his diet along the way. But the biggest thing that I realized as we were talking about his lifestyle, and that's what I like to talk about, is everything that's going on. Yes, he had a lot of stress, but his sleep, he was trying to get along and had actually convinced himself that 4 hours of sleep was enough. I don't have time for anything more. I've gotten used to it. I'm doing okay. But then you looked at the signs and the symptoms, like you sit on the couch and you fall asleep within seconds at the end of the day. That's not normal.
Not good.
He needs an alarm, and when it goes off, he doesn't know where he is. That's a sign. Getting, bored, so bored in a meeting that you fall asleep. That's a sign of lack of sleep. Boring meetings will always be boring, but they shouldn't put you to sleep. And so I convinced him he needed more sleep, because what people don't realize is if you don't get enough sleep, it messes up with everything in your body, so that your blood pressure goes up, your blood sugar goes up, you unknowingly
you eat sporadically, eat horribly. Yeah.
You're tired, you don't feel like moving, so you slouch in your chair instead of sit up straight, you sit instead of stand. And so I said, this is going to be the most important thing. So he got up to 6 hours of sleep. He said, what was incredible is he wasn't working. Like he thought, I'll never get all my work done. And what he found out is he actually worked faster because he had more energy. And he didn't get up to maybe the 7 or 8 hours that he needed on our last conversation. But 6 hours made a difference. His blood pressure was coming down. His pulse was coming down. He said his weight was coming down without him really focusing on the diet piece. And so, gosh.
Just behavior patterns.
Yeah.
We all know. We can all see the data of all these things that we're supposed to do. Yet it's so hard for us to implement them. And even it's easy for us to tell other people what they need to do, but it's so hard for us to get started on ourselves. Why is that? And how do you overcome that?
Yeah, that is really a tough thing. And I think when I'm speaking to a group, I don't reach everybody. But there are definitely people at the end of the program through the emails or the contacts that say, oh my gosh, that makes such sense. Yeah, and it was probably the message that they needed at that moment. And I think also what people have told me about me is I don't preach perfection. I am far from perfect. In fact, I tell people that, that I drink Diet Coke in the morning. And oftentimes I get, oh, you're a PhD nutritionist. Don't you know that garbage is going to kill you? And I'm like, oh, you know what? We all have our fixes, I guess, right?
Our little things.
I don't drink coffee. I don't drink alcohol. I like my Diet Coke. And, I have my Dove chocolates, my Dove dark chocolates. And it's not because dark chocolate is good for your heart. It's because I love the taste of it. And so I guess through my stories and my examples, people have an idea that we don't have to do everything perfect. And I think that's what holds people back. They're thinking they are so messed up, they can't possibly get to perfect. And I try to tell them, no, just like, that guy who got 6 hours of sleep, that made a huge difference. Maybe it's because you're drinking coffee all day. I've had people try to convince me, no, I drink coffee all day, but it doesn't affect my sleep. And I'm like, how do you know you're sleeping? And he said, well, it doesn't keep me up at night. And I'm like, how do you know? We know that when people are in the sleep stage and they wake up to a level of alertness, they can maybe not comprehend that they're alert, right? So they mess up their sleep cycles. It prevents them to getting a good night's sleep. And then, of course, the next morning you wake up and you're exhausted because you didn't get good sleep, and then you drink more coffee. Sometimes it's just one little thing. And the book, The One Thing, right? What is the one thing that you could do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? I love that. I quote that phrase all the time, because sometimes it's just one thing that changes everything. So you don't have to have 10 things on your list. I need to eat this way. I need to exercise this way. I need to sleep. What's the one thing? And that's what I work with people on, trying to help them to figure out what's the most important thing right now that could shift everything.
I'm wrapping up the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, I believe is his name. And he talks about that, about making it super easy. Like, don't make it a big thing. Like, if your goal is to exercise, for example, set your clothes out the night before. And then it's like when you put your gym shoes on first thing when you wake up, and it's like, and go to the gym and say, I'm only going to spend 5 minutes here. I'm going to walk in the door, spend 5 minutes, and I'm going to leave. I could stay here for an hour, but I'm going to do my 5 minutes. I'm going to leave. And it's like this small, simple, repeatable,
yes.
And then it begins to become this habit, and and you make it easy, essentially.
So one of my books in the 1990s, I've written like 6 books and numerous editions, but one of them was called Dr. Joe's No Big Deal Diet. And basically it was that. Instead of focusing on the hard things, which is what people do, like, I've got to exercise. And it's like, you've never exercised a day in your life. Well, then don't focus on that part. Just like you said, maybe do something little. But I call it the no big deal because I always ask people, okay, what would be no big deal for you to do right now? And they'd say, oh, well, I could do this. That's no big deal. Then do that,
Let's start there,
Start with the little things. Start with the things that are the easiest rather than the things that are the hardest. But for some reason, we always want to focus on those hard things. What a waste.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that I also think the justifications, like you were talking about earlier with the coffee, like, oh, I can drink this whole pot of coffee. It's not going to affect me throughout the course. That's what I always do. The justifications that we give ourselves and the rationalizations that we come up with. Well, I can drink alcohol at the end of each day, and I can, create these negative patterns, but they don't have this effect on me. Well, if you're honest with yourself, you can step away. You can see they really do if you're willing to remove them.
Yeah, I always say, that's a good story, but is it true? And I think we all need to ask ourselves, that's a good story. And I'll be honest with anyone out there, I have some pretty good stories myself that I've convinced myself of. And it's funny, somebody challenged me the other day because, see, I drink the Diet Coke. That's my morning cup of coffee. Usually it's 1, but I have to be honest with you. During COVID, it's kind of stretched to 2 cans. But so I'm not perfect that way. But the thing is, I remember telling somebody why I drank Diet Coke because they were trying to tell me how bad it was. And I was like, well, you know what? when I had my eating disorder, and throughout all those years, because it was 5 years of a heavy eating disorder and then the recovery afterwards, I was addicted to caffeine. I literally drank liters of, I think it was Tab. It wasn't Diet Coke, because Diet Coke didn't come out into the 80s.
Now you're really dating yourself.
I know. So it was Tab. I was drinking liters of Tab. I didn't drink water. And so my story is, I am convinced that even if you think you're addicted to something, like addicted to Diet Coke or you're addicted to sugar, you can learn to moderate it. And so I use that as an example for myself, saying, you know what? I can have 1 or 2 cans of Diet Coke. It doesn't have to lead to 3 liters a day. And so that's my story. But anyway, someone said, that's a good story, Joe, but is it true? And I'm like, you know what? I'm sticking with that right now. And I'm just going to keep that story, because that is the least of my problems right now, right? We got lots of things we can work on.
And I think too, it's very important to have a reward system in place too. You need to have some yin and yang to all aspects of your lifestyle, whether it comes to diet or, the health and wellness and all that. I mean, like, it's okay to, like, when you work out and you've done all this hard things, it's okay to have that little treat as a reward, as a stimulus to keep you going for more. I think that's a very important aspect of it. So, hey,
I agree.
If your reward is Diet Coke, then hey, you're ahead of the game compared to a lot of other people.
Oh, don't forget the Dove chocolates too.
Yeah. Well, again, dark chocolates, for me, it's Krispy Kreme donuts and Mountain Dew. So.
Oh my God.
Or Mountain Dew slushy. That's even the worst. Like my crutch is like, I'll run and I'll do a really hard, long exercise on Saturday for a Mountain Dew slushy as my reward. Wow. When I'm done, I'm going to go have this. And I'm trying to get the smaller and smaller version as I go along and realize how terrible it is. But that's what it is for me. So, and that's way worse than a Diet Coke. So
yeah, there you go.
You're doing well. But
that's a good example, Nate. What you've done, you said I try to go smaller and smaller. Because I don't buy the liter bottles. I don't care that they're cheaper per ounce, but I have no idea of how much I drank, right?
Right.
Same thing. I'm not going to buy the 16-ounce bottles or even bigger individual bottles, because the same thing, I would finish the 16-ounce bottle. And if I wanted a second one, that would be 2 No. In fact, I love the little 7-ounce bottles, but my husband oftentimes.
They're so cute.
They are so cute. But same thing, I can do 2 of those. And for some reason, 2 7-ounce is almost as satisfying as 2 12. But my husband does the shopping. He mostly gets the 12-ounce because he looks at the price of those 7 ounces. He's like, that's a ripoff.
He's like me. You're like, yeah, what's that price per ounce? I got to get the best deal possible. We're cheap like that. But no, I totally get it. But that too, I think it's good to have. I just totally lost where I was going to go with that. Everything in moderation. I think, it's important to have, you can have some rewards, but when you can moderate it. And if it's something that you can't moderate, then that's when you need to take a tougher look. Is this some kind of an addiction? Is this an issue that's getting out of control or out of hand?
Yeah, I think that's good. Everything in moderation. It's not necessarily what sells very well. People want to have the gimmick. They want to be told what to do until they don't want to be told what to do. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I think everyone says, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they're fine with that for a month or a couple of weeks or even a year. But eventually, we're like 2-year-old kids. I'm not going to do that anymore because someone told you to do it. And so my philosophy is helping people to make their own rules. So my rules are, 1 or 2 cans of Diet Coke. That's my rule. My rule is also 4 Dove chocolates. Sometimes I have 3, sometimes I have 6. But the rule is 4, and I don't beat myself up if I don't match it exactly. Because you know what? I'm perfectly imperfect. So
I love that you set a standard, and it's okay if we come up short. It's okay if we meet the goal, but it's like set the goal. And I think that's true again with all of our aspects. Like in my household, it's a conversation around budget and around schedule. It's like we struggle to set a schedule. Well, let's set the schedule, and if we don't stick to it, we don't stick to it. If we go astray, we go astray. But at least we set the schedule. At least we set.
You have some idea of where you want to go. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right. And I think it's the same thing, but I want people to come up with their own rules and Stop listening to the so-called experts about what you should do. What would work for you? So I can give you an example of at least one person who has broken all the basic rules that we're supposed to do, and they're fit and healthy.
Right. So sometimes it's just good genetics.
Yeah, well, no, sometimes though it's like whatever. Like there is somebody very high up in the State Department who, we were talking about naps, and I say to everybody, it's best not to nap after 4 o'clock because it can screw up your night's sleep, and that's what the research shows. Well, this woman is in a very high level position. She's public facing, like all day long, and then oftentimes evening events as well. And she travels all over the world. She's in a different country every single day. But what she came up with is a way to be able to manage her energy during those long days. Is she has her staff get her back to the hotel at 5, because you have to change for the evening events. It's very formal within the State Department. And so she gets to the hotel at 5 o'clock. She naps for 20 minutes. She showers and gets dressed for another 20 minutes. And then she says, it makes me feel like I'm starting a new day, and I have all the energy of a new day. And a new day is usually from 6 until midnight. I mean, it is like almost a full day. But see, that's an example of somebody who, we know what the research shows, but as long as she just naps her 20 minutes, and she says sometimes she doesn't fall asleep, it's more of a relaxation. It doesn't mess with her sleep because, she is exhausted by the end of the day.
Well, number one, that's super impressive. I couldn't imagine.
That's
amazing.
And she's not in her 20s,
Right. But too, I think it speaks to the personalized approach. Jordan Peterson is a guy who I greatly admire, and he and his daughter have suffered from some terrible autoimmune things, and they come from an area in northern Canada that's very isolated, and so over time they've developed different genetically, so they've went through some real struggles, and she actually went through some horrible surgeries and terrible struggles trying to get right. But they came up, and I say all that to say they came up with this personalized approach of like a very paleo based diet that had fixed a tremendous amount of their autoimmune diseases, and I think personally saved that girl's life ultimately at the end of the day. But that diet that works for them, that has gotten her healthy, is not going to be healthy for most people. It's not going to be the way for, like, let's say a guy that grew up in Hawaii, or like somebody that's from the southern United States. I think having that personalized approach, you learn to figure out what it is that works best for you, what it is that's going to make you perform at your highest levels.
Yeah. So yeah, it's listening to your body. It's listening to the stories you tell yourself, asking them if they're true. I love that.
So for you personally, what's one habit or thing that you have that you do in your life that maybe say most people don't have or don't do on a regular basis that has contributed to your success?
Jeez, I don't know if like nobody does. I eat 6 times a day. I always eat first thing in the morning. I always have a snack, lunch snack, dinner snack. I always have a bedtime snack. In fact, I was told, oh gosh, probably a dozen years ago, I had acid reflux. And it's not the kind of reflux that people get heartburn from. So I didn't know I had acid reflux. It's more of it affects the sinuses. It's called LPR, silent reflux. But anyway, when they actually scoped down and said, yeah, you have, a hiatal hernia, which means the flap between your esophagus and your stomach isn't closing right. Acid is coming up on your vocal cords. That's what's causing your hoarseness and your sinus issues. I laughed them off and said, can't be. But, after, 2 or 3 other doctors said the same thing, I finally said, okay, how am I going to handle my reflux? And I'll tell you, people, you look it up and they say, don't snack at night. Well, I found if I don't snack at night, I eat more at dinner and I have more of issues because, I'm like, I have to have something. So I snack at night, which is like one of those things that people say, you're not supposed to snack at night, not just for reflux, but for weight and everything. I always have a night snack, always. So maybe that's kind of one of the weird things that I think people feel that they shouldn't do, and I'm doing it.
So is it still something that you suffer from, the reflux?
No, I mean, having a nice
Or
snack.
having this snack made it go away?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it ever goes away. You know how you can have a bad back and you
Right.
do things to make that back feel better, but let's face it, you still have a bad back. So I think the reflux is always there, but the flare-ups have been minimal. I haven't lost my voice in years.
Nice.
And I used to, all the acid got on my vocal cords and caused the laryngitis.
Yeah, and for you in your line of work, I mean, being able to
Yes.
speak is
Oh my God.
critical. I mean, that's
Yes,
what you
yes, yes.
do. So,
Yeah.
so
So
here's another one for you. So, what's something odd, weird, or different about you that's maybe contributed to some of your success?
I don't know if it's odd or weird or different, but I'm just plain stubborn. So if someone tells me I can't do something, it makes me want to do it. Can you relate to that?
Oh yeah, as the oldest of five, yeah, I can totally relate to that. I was going to
Um,
ask, where do you fit into the eight?
so I have 8 siblings, but so there's 9, including me.
Oh,
Now
sorry, nine.
I'm number 3,
Okay.
which doesn't explain anything, I don't think. But I do remember, and I talk about this as if it's a scientific term. But when I was very young, my mom told me that, like, my grandfather would try to carry us up the stairs, me and my cousin, who was a few months older than me, and he would try to lift me up because I'm the youngest one, right? And I would say, I'm big girl, and I wouldn't let him lift me up. I want to walk the stairs by myself. And, there's still a little big girl in me. It's been a lot of years, but there's still a little big girl. So if someone says you can't do something, I give it my all to do it. I remember I was the director of the dietetics program at UT Pan American, which I mentioned earlier. And I was in my 20s. I didn't have my doctorate at the time. There was no reason for me to be successful in the position. It was what they call a coordinated undergraduate program. So it was a didactic program along with a clinical program merged together. It was relatively new. I didn't graduate from that type of program. I knew nothing about it. For some reason, they gave me the job. I think it's because it was on the border and it was hard to recruit people in that area. I was already there. But anyway, I say this because I worked real hard on the curriculum, get everything going with the community. I mean, I worked so hard. And then when the accrediting agencies came down, they did a 3-day tour. I thought things were going well. And then at the final report on day 3, in front of all my peers, the president of the university, everybody, basically they said, I failed.
No way.
And I had something like 60 days to write a rebuttal. And oh my gosh, I wrote a rebuttal, got the program accredited. I mean, that's how I am. I'm going to dig. I'm not going to say, oh, they didn't give it to me. And it was basically, good luck. You can try again in 2 years. No, it ain't going to happen. And so throughout my life, I've had a lot of experiences like that. If someone tells me I can't do it, I work even harder.
That's amazing, because my questions leading up to this were going to be, what's your favorite failure and what's one of your biggest successes? And that sounds like that's kind of like two, both wrapped into one.
Yeah.
So above and beyond that, do you have a favorite failure?
I always look back at that and say, yeah,
that's the one.
That was a major fail and major embarrassment. And yet I was able to prove to them everything that they said that I didn't include in the program. As you can see on page $263, 263 in the second paragraph, I mentioned that. I mean, it was all there. I knew it really well, but they didn't see it. And I think they saw a 26-year-old person. How could new
that knows
to
her stuff?
Yeah, I knew my stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say, biggest failure and the biggest success. And
well, I love that. I think that comes back to being an expert at what you do. And when you're a master at your craft, when you're an expert at what you do, then you can talk the talk. And when people come in there not necessarily having all the information and making a rash decision, when you know your stuff and that's not the right call, that's another thing I like about Jordan Peterson. I respect so much about him. He debunks a lot of stuff that's out there because of his knowledge of fact and his ability to call upon that.
I love the idea of fact. Nate, we've lost the respect for science, and that really saddens me. Facts and research and statistics, it may be boring, But if we don't frame our life around that, we're going in the wrong direction.
It's scary times for sure. So let me ask you this. Above and beyond that, did you ever have an aha moment with this line of work where you kind of realized, hey, I'm onto something, this is going to work? You know, because for me, going into this personal development realm, it's very scary to not know how your message is going to be received, how people are going to take to what it is you're trying to do. And you've clearly had quite a bit of success in this arena. Was there a point in time where you kind of had that aha moment where you're like, yep, this is going to work, I'm on to something here?
Well, Nate, is still something I struggle with all the time, because the whole idea of energy, people think I'm selling magical rocks or something like that, like, ooh, so it is still always a hard sell. But I have to say, back, my first book was called Dining Lean in Houston, How to Eat Healthy in All Your Favorite Restaurants in Houston. I wrote it locally, and then I took it nationally. When I took it nationally, you have to get it in all the bookstores. So you have to approach the book buyers. And back then there were a lot of bookstore chains, but I remember specifically talking to Barnes & Noble book buyer, and I knew I had her attention for like 20 seconds. And I had practiced. I knew exactly what to say. And she said, why do we need another book on health and nutrition? And I had the statistics, and in 20 seconds, she said, good, we'll buy 2 for every store, and we'll see where it goes from there. And I remember getting off the phone and saying, yes. I mean, that's what it's all about, is having a concise message that's clear with some facts around it, right? Because people want to know those facts. And so, frankly, it's something I have to think about all the time. It's like Story Brand, that book, really having that clear, concise message. If people aren't buying it, they're confused.
Right.
So,
you got to have a very clear and concise message. So let me ask you this. How did you go, again, because I'm going down this realm with my 8 keys to great, and I'm trying to really hone my process and really clarify my message. How did you go about honing your message and honing your product and services that you offer now?
Wow.
How did you crystallize that vision?
I don't know exactly. I mean, because I've been in it for so many years. I don't know if I could go back, and it was a process, Nate.
It's hard, right? It's harder than you think.
Right. So people look at it and say, she did this or that, and it's like, I don't even know sometimes how I got to a certain process. It was just based on feedback, I think, and tweaking, and I don't know. I don't know if I can exactly put it into.
Well, all of it is a continual and constant reevaluation and a constant molding and honing of the craft and honing of the message. I think,
yeah.
You've spent 20 years. The message looks much more concise 20 years now down the road than it did when you first started. So it's constantly evolving, I feel like. But for me, a lot of it is like, just trying to understand the right order and the right like modus operandi of trying to make sure that everything flows and your process makes sense. And I'm finding it to be a little bit more tricky than I first anticipated.
Well, sure. I would say that it does naturally change. It does.
It does evolve and grow, doesn't it?
I mean, you came up with the 8 keys, and you might find out a year down the road, oh my gosh, it's really 7, it's really 9. And now you got to change your whole website and all that.
I was going to say, don't tell me that. That's going to ruin my logo, everything. I'm going to have to start from scratch.
But
no, 8.
That is what happens.
No, you're so right.
So, because I have evolved. My tagline used to be helping busy people stay healthy, sane, and productive. But, lately it's I've been talking more about the energy, helping people stay energized so they can be healthy, sane, and productive. Just adding that in there to help people understand where I'm coming from.
So getting back onto that note, what's the one tool or an app or just an even like a physical thing or whatever that people could utilize to help them to boost their energy levels? Or it could be a program, obviously, other than your content and your website. Well, I mean, we'll wrap with that. But I mean, above and beyond that, is there like an app or something that you think people would should utilize that would help them in being more motivated and having higher energy levels?
Well, a lot of the sleep apps are not completely scientific, but I think they're fun to follow. And so if you think you might be having some sleep issues and you're not really sure, it may not hurt to get a sleep app and see what it's saying about that. Some of them actually detect how much you're snoring, which could be an indication that you have sleep apnea. So that could put you on the right path for recovery. I use the Map My Run to just time my workouts. I don't save any of them. It's just more of like, oh, I worked out for 23 minutes or I worked out for 65 minutes or whatever. So I love the time aspect just to know that I did it. But it could be as simple as when I'm swimming, I used to try to keep track of my laps, but I realize I can't. I think I'm counting and then all of a sudden I have no idea because my mind is going on. So just a watch, just because I want to know. But
why don't you save your data?
What's that?
Why don't you save your data?
Because I don't need to compare myself. It's just more of, hey,
you don't use that as like a tracking tool?
Nate, the only thing that I do track is I have MyFitnessPal and I've kept my weight in there for 10 years maybe or something, a long time. And I can see, like, for example, I have seasonal weight gain. It's like 3 to 4 pounds, but you can see throughout the whole thing, it's like this. And for me, I'm not so much hung up on my weight as I am, if I notice it's going like this and it's summertime when it should be doing like this. And again, it's only within a 3 to 4 pound range. But if I notice it doing something, that's time for me to say, what is going on with me? What am I doing differently? Have I gotten away from my exercise? Am I eating more? Am I stress eating? Do I need to manage my stress? So I just look at that as just kind of an assessment. I don't count my calories.
That's why I asked about just saving the data, because for me, like, I use Strava as an app, and I don't use it, again, like what you're saying. I'm not like trying to compare myself to like, oh, I got to get my new PR and all this. But to go back and look and see, 10 years worth of data, you see trends. You can see, okay, hey, am I trending the right way? Am I trending down?
But I know what you're talking about. You can't make changes. You can't improve. You can't.
Gotta be paying attention
if you're not paying attention to it. And I guess with me, with the movement, I'm not very competitive. I don't register for races. For me, it's doing whatever it is that I want. I do something every single day, and I could run 2 miles, or I could swim 45 minutes, or I could bike for an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's different for different things. I love to feel my heart racing. But I don't look at my pulse. And the only time I ever track it is I live in Florida, where it is extremely flat. There is like even in Orlando, we had this one overpass near the house that we used to run. There was a parking garage at the medical center that I used to climb, and that was my challenge. So when my whole family's up in New England, and I love hiking Mount Washington, which is the highest peak, in the east of the Mississippi. And so in order to train to climb Mount Washington, which is an all-day event going up and coming down, you've got to do something other than Florida workouts. So whenever I do that, I would say I start 6 months in advance, and I start, doing the parking garage routine for 30 minutes, 35, 40, working all the way up into hours, listening to books on tape, so I would keep track of it then, because I have this goal, and I know that I can't climb Mount Washington if I don't progress up to the certain level. But otherwise, I'm just trying to maintain health. John and I always take an evening stroll or an evening bike ride, in addition to working out in the morning. So we have the 2 workout. Plenty of.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
To me, those are, and I'm actually about to do a whole piece on this, talking about that, getting some morning exercise. But then the new aspect I've really been focusing on here lately is that evening walk.
It is.
And especially if you can do it with a spouse or a person that you're close to, having that like that after dinner, just a stroll. It's not like you're going out there to go sweat or to go kill yourself. It's just to
Except we do
get
sweat
outside.
here because it's
Well,
Florida.
yeah, there you walk outside, you're sweating.
So I'm taking like 3 showers a day sometimes. It's horrible.
Yeah, I can't
But
imagine your laundry routine.
and for those people who don't have someone nearby, you can put in your headpiece and walk with a friend across the country. And I do that sometimes too. I have a friend in Dallas. Her name is Neely. And, I might call her in the middle of the day because I want to brainstorm about something. She'll say, hold on, let me get my sneakers. And, she gets in her distance and we're both walking and talking about it. So that's why I say 3 showers, because sometimes in the middle of the day, if I have
a great idea.
Yeah, if I have to brainstorm, you do not think your best thoughts in front of the computer keyboard. You do not. You got to get away from it.
Well, I love the idea of, like if you can't have a in-person friend or spouse, have a virtual friend.
Yeah.
Having that earpiece in your, if you're going to have an earpiece in anyway, whether you're listening to an audiobook or music or whatever, you could be having a conversation. When you're having that stroll, I think the physical movement allows for much more, like you said, it allows that thought-provoking process.
Yeah, and if you don't believe me, just think about all the times you've come up with great ideas in the shower, or when you're drifting off to sleep, or when you first wake up in the morning. Best ideas don't come in front of the keyboard.
And I think setting these morning routines and these evening routines, I think, are also a key aspect to developing this high energy level. I think they really, particularly the morning routines, setting that tone for the day. So above and beyond exercise and your Diet Coke, are there any other morning routines that are a part of your high energy levels?
So Nate, we were talking about this earlier. I typically would walk or do something in the morning, and I love listening to the New York Times, the Daily. I think that's what it's called.
Nice.
So it's like 30 minutes or so, and then maybe an NPR up first or something like that, just to kind of get overview of the world situation. I like to do that, and most of the time that didn't create too much stress in me, and so that was a good morning.
That's good.
But lately, I've got caught down the rabbit hole, and I'm trying to pull myself back from that.
I was gonna say that routine may not be so healthy anymore.
No, it's not. It's not. So
terrible.
But it was always the morning workout, and like you said, I always have breakfast. I have the Diet Coke. I even have the chocolates in the morning. That's part of my morning routine, believe it or not. Because I have acid.
Well, I like the fact that you say to eat and have a little treat in the morning. I think that's a big component to getting that energy up for the day, right?
Here's the way I look at it, and it's my story, and I'm going to stick with it, whether it's true or not.
We're going off the scientific route a little bit here, but anyway.
So many times, actually, there's some research to support this, though, because let's face it, we can all find research to support any of our opinions anyway.
Right.
But so many of us, we say to ourselves, if I am good all day, I can have blank. And I don't like that. And it's not to say that you can't go for a run and have your slushy. Is it a slushy or Slurpee?
Yeah. Either one. Yeah, same difference. It's a racetrack slushy.
Oh, that's how I didn't realize that. So, I'm not saying that you can't have your special treat after your workout, but I'm just saying so many times we set our goals, and if we don't reach it, we can't have that treat. Or then if we have the treat, we put ourselves down. Oh, you didn't even do what you were supposed to do, and you're eating all this, and you shouldn't. And I have a different attitude. I treat myself first thing in the morning, just because I deserve it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because you're worth it.
Because I'm worth it, right? And it does. What it does, I think, for me, is I've already had my chocolate, and for me, whenever I what do you call it with the boxes? Like in a wrestling match or a baseball, you have this versus that, and the winner becomes
the box score. The box score
is a box score, and then you kind of work it all the way down to the World Series or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
or maybe you talk about the brackets for playoffs.
Yes.
Playoff bracket.
Right.
Yeah.
So many times, like I'll ask people, like, what is your favorite treat? And they're like, I love everything. I love all kinds of food. And I'm like, okay, give me some of them. And then I'll say, okay, this or this, which one would you pick if it was on the menu? And, and I think if people start doing that, they could bracket down and saying, what is my absolute number one? And for me, it's dark chocolate. So for example, if I don't eat dark chocolate, I could eat almost anything all day because I'm still, it didn't hit the spot. You know what I mean? So by eating the Dove dark chocolates first thing in the morning, it says that I'm worth it. I had the very best, and like other things don't bother me, Krispy Kremes including. It's kind of like, I already had my Dove chocolate.
I'm good. Yeah. You gave yourself that little micro reward. I think micro rewards and micro habits, every time we can break these down into smaller, simpler steps,
right?
I think we're always on
and
the right track.
And micro movements. See, you're sitting down. I'm standing up. How come you're not standing up, Nate?
Oh, right now, you mean? Because I just got done exercising, so I'm a little bit worn out. I went for a run this morning before we got going.
Oh, that's good.
But I digress. Let me ask you this. Here's a little fun question I like to ask a lot of my guests. And you can take a minute if you need to. What's your one item under $100 that you use on a daily basis that you could not live without?
Besides Diet Coke and Dove chocolate?
Besides Diet Coke and Dove chocolate. Yeah, because that's like a consumable. I'm thinking more like a something physical or tangible.
I will say my Teva sandals.
Old school Tevas.
Yeah, Tevas, however you pronounce them.
I say Tevas. I think they're supposed to be said Tevas, but I say Tevas.
I know. And maybe because they used to be Tevas and now people call them Tevas. I don't know. But I have a pair of, they're not producing them the same way, but it's like a flip-flop style and it has a wrap around the ankle. And when I lived south of here, now here I can wear them 6, 7, 8 months out of the year. But when I lived farther south, I lived down close to Miami and in Orlando, I literally wore them every day. They are the most comfortable shoes. I have curly hammer toes that are more genetic than anything else. And so no shoe, absolutely no shoe is comfortable that's riding over my toes. No, I don't care what the sneakers are. Some are more comfortable than others, but those are shoes that I've literally bought them in every single color when I can find them. Right now, they're only producing black, and I'm really upset about that. But even with my black ones, I think I have 5 pair of black ones.
No kidding.
Yeah, and they're only like $40, and I would buy 20 more if they had 20 more colors.
That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of answer I was looking for.
Because if your feet can't be comfortable. And by the way, these are so comfortable that I walk with them. I will even run short distances with them. I've hiked with them.
Wow.
You go kayaking with them because they're in and out of the kayak. They don't fall off.
That was what I loved so much about them is their versatility. Like you could literally just like stomping through the swamp and not have to worry about anything. And then you could be hiking on a trail and still do just fine with them. They were so durable. And I bought the old school pair that are, more plastic and rubber than anything, but they're comfortable and they can, what I like about them is their durability factor for sure.
Yeah.
But that's a great answer for that question. Thank you for that. I will say, if you are looking for a good shoe, particularly looking for if you have toe issues, and if you know my dad, you've seen his feet. It's
no, I haven't.
They're absolutely atrocious. It will literally turn your stomach. But anyway, so I say that to say, Ultra shoes are a shoe that's designed with a very wide toe box.
Say that again.
Ultra, ALTRA. They're based out of Utah. I've actually had one of their co-founders on the podcast, but if you have feet issues, they're actually the only shoe that's authorized by the American Association of Podiatry or whatever it's called. But they have a very wide toe box and they're specifically designed for people with toe and issues and things like that.
I will have to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, luckily I run in New Balance 94E. And I don't have that wide feet, but it's for the whole toe box. And nobody but New Balance.
Those would be perfect for you because that's exactly the people that go to New Balance for that wide shoe and everything are flocking to Ultra like crazy. And they're the #1 shoe on the Appalachian Trail.
Wow. You're talking about the Ultra is?
Ultra, that's correct.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so definitely give them a check out.
Why haven't I discovered that? And I have done lots of research on funky toes. So,
Well, if you're into endurance sports, they're very heavily marketed in that area, particularly the endurance running, like with the guys who like to go run the 100-mile trail runs and things of that nature, because your feet swell so much. So these shoes are actually designed for your foot to swell and to have some of those long-term issues. That's why they're so good for people with foot issues, because they're designed for some of that.
Well, I tell you, I miss the mountains. I need the warmth. I really need it. But I mean, you're in a perfect location where you're right there at the beginning of the Appalachian. And when I lived up there, we hiked and ran in the mountains all the time. Loved it.
Yeah. It's I'm like you. I need a little bit of the surf and turf, but I also like to get up into the mountains. My ideal scenario is to spend about half the year in both scenarios. So maybe someday, right?
That's right, maybe. And I have family up in New England, so I can still do that, just not right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully soon. Well, so let me ask you this: getting back into the self-help stuff and in this energy topic that we were talking about before, what's some of the worst advice that you hear in this area?
I think people are really getting into this intermittent fasting, which, like I said, it is no different than skipping breakfast. And if it works for you, fine. But I would say for the majority of the people, it doesn't. And part of the reason is it teaches you to not eat when you're hungry. And that goes back to even, early Weight Watchers, when they would say, if you're hungry, just ignore it. It'll go away. And here's the thing that people don't understand. When you are hungry and you don't eat, over time, you do stop feeling hungry, right? You're really, really, really hungry, and your stomach is just like, eating up your liver, and you're like, I can't handle this. And all of a sudden you notice that the hunger goes away. And people are like, yeah, that's as good. It's burning my fat. Well, as if it was. What people don't realize is that when your blood sugar gets that low, remember your brain, your red blood cells, your nervous system, they're all requiring glucose, which is a carbohydrate. You're not going to get it from body fat. And so the body, will burn some fat, when you ignore that hunger, it'll burn some fat, but at least 50% of all the fuel is coming from glucose, which you need for your brain, your red blood cells, and blah, blah, blah. And we only have like 300 calories worth in our liver. And for those of you who are athletic and say, no, I've got some in my legs and arms, realize what's in your arm can only be used in your arm. What's in your leg can only be used in your leg. It can't go up to the brain. So we've only got 300 calories, about the number of calories in a diet frozen dinner. It's nothing. By the time we wake up, almost all of it's gone. Its purpose is to keep us alive during the night. So, when we ignore our hunger during the day and this liver glycogen is gone, the only other place we can get glycogen is from our muscles. And so the body breaks down the muscle. Yeah, it's so stupid. So, I always say, all that stuff you work so hard at, outside or at the gym, you're now chiseling it away. And so that just kills me when people are ignoring their hunger, riding it out so they can burn more fat. It doesn't work that way. But it's hard to convince people.
Still want to do it.
But you were nodding your head, so you know all this stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it makes perfect sense to me. That's brilliant. So you have a podcast, and you heard a little bit about this podcast. Who do you think would be good for this podcast based on the tagline, ordinary people trying to live extraordinary lives and people trying to live this kind of lifestyle? In your mind, who do you think would be somebody that would be good for the show or that you would find interesting?
So I just started the podcast in March. I don't know if you know the story. Basically, when the pandemic hit, all my speaking engagements had gotten canceled, within a week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And not so much for the income. It wasn't even that. I'm at an age where, okay, I could retire.
Yeah, you're comfortable.
Yeah, but it was more of what do I do all day? I need to have stimulation. I mean, that's why I do what I do. I love learning. And so I bought myself a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I hunkered down until my back really hurt because puzzles are really hard. But anyway.
And the next day I had to find something else to do.
Yes. So no, it took me 3 days to do that puzzle. And I was out walking the beach on the third day, and I said to myself, okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I thought, you know what? I need to talk with people. And so I just started kind of what you're doing, where I called up people and we had this interview, and I posted on YouTube, posted on social media, and it was all about people that could help us feel healthy and sane. So I called it my Health and Sanity Call, because that's all it was a call. And I had it live, and people were logging on. And then over time, people were saying, I want to do it, but do you have a podcast? Because it's just a conversation. We don't need to like log into YouTube or anything like that. And one of my guests told me about how easy it was to get on the podcast, and I transferred all those interviews onto podcast. So I'm relatively new. So when you ask me what guest, I would have to kind of go through my list and see, frankly, like who would be a good guest for you, and be happy to refer people. We had some real exciting people. And most of them were just sharing real small things that you can do, a shift in your mindset. I love that, talking about breathing, nose breathing. We had somebody come on and talk about, simple yoga moves. Just, again, people are trying to look for a big solution when sometimes it's the smallest little things, about that, every journey begins with a single step. Right? A Chinese proverb, right? And I think people need to realize all they have to do is start taking some steps, whether you want to climb a mountain or whether you want to be a better person or a healthier person. Just start with one simple thing. That's it.
Well, your message for that podcast is something that's very much needed right now. So I think the timing of you getting into the space and the timing of everybody needing some of this mental sanity stuff is perfect. Yeah. So you totally set me up for my follow-up question. Yeah. So who would be your dream or ideal guest, or somebody that you would like to see on your show?
I have a call into Brian Wansink, PhD. He was a researcher at Cornell University. Now he has his own company. And I heard something that he posted on Facebook, or saw something, and he was talking about how he's gotten back into playing the saxophone for just 20 minutes a day. And I think this is a message for all of us, is that so many times we grow up and we forget to do the things that used to make us really happy. We're working, and maybe we even look at exercise that way. I gotta exercise, I gotta eat right, I gotta get my sleep, I gotta take care of the kids, I gotta work, what are you gonna do just for you? And a number of years ago, when my daughter, who is now 30, when she was very little, she got enrolled in dance class, and I hadn't taken much dance. I took dance in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I think. But I decided they had a tap class at the same time, and I got into tap dancing. So now this has been more than 30 years. And I've been taking tap, but in the last 6 months, they closed down the studio, of course, and I'm not tapping. And so when I saw his post about he's just going to play the saxophone 20 minutes a day, I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to start tapping, even if it's just 20 minutes a day. Get out my tap shoes. I got my tap floor right here, and I need to just start doing it. So anyway, I want to have him on, just talk about, getting back to those things we love to have. So you just reminded me, I need to follow up on that communication and make sure he gets on. So not to talk about his professional stuff, which is fascinating enough, but are you doing something that makes your heart sing?
For me, like you were talking about with tap dance, for my child, when he, again, this is a while back now because he's old and out of the house, but when he was going into middle school as a graduation or whatever kind of thing, I got him a little guitar. And I was hoping that he would kind of pick up so this is about the time you begin to pick up an instrument and go down that path or whatever. Yeah. And of course, he jumped right into percussion. And the guitar just sat there in the corner, didn't get touched. And so I was sitting there and I was like, well, you know what? If it's just going to sit there, why don't I just take the time to learn to play it? And so again, kind of started with about 20 minutes a day and just kind of muddling my way through. And it was, my wife hates it, for the record, because I'm so terrible. But, it was just creating that stimulus and allowing us, like we think about, why do we sign our kids up for the dance class and for the instrument, the piano lessons? But it's because we want to stimulate them. We want them to learn. We want them to grow.
Maybe
we
it's
want
because
them to...
we want that for ourselves.
Well, we need that for ourselves. I think it's so important that we not forget that it's not just about the child, it's about us. Just because we're adults doesn't mean we should stop learning. We should stop growing. We should stop taking these lessons. Why aren't we taking piano lessons? Why aren't we taking tap lessons? Why aren't we doing the same things that we're trying to provide for our children? Because if you think about why, what's the why behind what we do for our kids? Why do we make them do soccer when they don't necessarily want to? Because we know the value in that experience. Well, okay, well, why aren't we doing that as an adult? Why for adults is it, okay, well, we can be on our social media. We can just disengage with the world. We can create these negative habits, but then we expect our kids to not do that, So that learning mindset is just, if you ever get the opportunity, Carol Dweck has a book called Mindset that's just phenomenal. It's really changed my perspective through my little journey of doing this. So Dr. Joe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your information and your energy that you bring to the podcast. It's really, it's encouraging to see people out there doing what it is that you're doing. So,
and you too. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm glad your dad, put us together so we could finally meet.
Kudos to him for that.
Well, he talks so highly of you. I know he's a proud daddy.
Well, he talks very highly of you. And it was funny, as soon as he told me that he was going to be on your podcast, that was the immediate opportunity for us to try to reach out and connect. So I'm grateful for your time. Before we wrap up, tell everybody where they can find you, how if they want to find out more information, or the best way to learn more about how they can increase their energy levels.
All right. So go to DRJO. There's no E in my name. DRJO.com, 4 letters.
Dr. Joe.
Yes, and you can find out everything there at the bottom of the first page. You can find about my podcast and link to all of that there. You can also take the energy quiz to find out where your energy is. And when you do that, you get a lot of information back about how to boost up your energy. And we also do group coaching. I do individual coaching. And I just started an online course about how to reboot your energy. So however you like to learn, I'd like to help you.
Well, I have to give you super compliments because I'm working on developing my website, and I spent some time on your website, and a lot of websites just have a lot of that fluff, and a lot of that just feel good stuff. But the amount of content on your site was one thing that I really appreciated.
Yeah.
The depth of information is very nice.
Thank you very much. I've been in the business, like I said, a long time. In fact, I just transferred my website over, and not all my blogs are there yet. So wait till you see it when they all get over.
Even more information to come, right? Yeah. Well, that's what we're in the process of doing now, trying to get all that information to the new website as a process. Yeah. But you can see there was a lot of time and effort and work done there. So it definitely reflects in the message.
And I would also like to say that while I'm not speaking out at conferences, I'm doing virtual programs now for companies and organizations. And I started something brand new. It's called the Reboot Energy Quiz, and we take it kind of like a quiz show, like you would on TV, where I ask questions. I post the answers up there, and people, put their responses in the chat box. We have prizes giveaway at the end. It is super fun. I launched it just last week to 2 organizations, and the feedback was dynamic. So it's a way to learn about how to energize your body. And just like people said that the hour went by really fast because
it's a completely different format, right? It's a way to learn in a fun environment, and you kind of feel like that Price is Right kind of mentality.
It's that kind of stuff. Yeah. And of course, I have all the energy too, so that it made it.
Yeah, that totally reflects in what you're doing. So, and that's what, again, one of those things that kind of makes you stand out. The fact that there's so many people out there that have content to provide, but the way that you're providing it in such a cool and meaningful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nate. All right.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. So, what'd you think? What did I miss? Was there a topic you wish we had covered? Was there an area of discussion you want to know more about? Or was the whole thing just too long? Please send us your questions and feedback on social media to @ExtraordinaryPodcast, or check check out our website, extraordinarypodcast.net. Subscribe there for all the latest episodes, blog posts, and more. And if you're tired of living the same old ordinary life, shoot me an email, nate@extraordinarypodcast.net, and I will send you your own customizable blueprint that will walk you through step by step how to create your own extraordinary life. And if you or someone you know already fits the profile, you can submit a request to be interviewed on the website as well. Finally, if you like what you heard or learned today, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and follow the Extraordinary Podcast on all your favorite platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you feel inspired, show your support for the show by donating through Patreon. It is through this financial support that we are able to continue to bring to light ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Thank you for your support, and most of all, just being you. This is Nate G, and we'll see you next week.